Live from Washington, D.C., this is Transport Topics Newsmakers, the digital interview series that gives you access to candid conversations between industry experts and a veteran reporter. Sponsored by Netrodyne.
Hello, and thank you for tuning in to the latest edition of Newsmakers from Transport Topics. I'm Seth Clevenger, TT's Managing Editor of Features and Multimedia, and I'll be your host for the next half hour. In this program, we are very pleased to present another in-depth conversation with a leading figure in the trucking and logistics industry. Today, we're going to focus on the intersection of in-cab technology, artificial intelligence, and driver safety with John Elliott, founder and executive chairman of Load One, an expedited transportation and logistics provider based in Taylor, Michigan. This edition of TT Newsmakers is sponsored by Netrodyne, a provider of AI-enabled video safety technology for fleet operators. Before we get to our conversation with John, I'd like to share the following message from Netrodyne. Are you coaching your drivers weekly? If not, your fleet may be at risk. Why? When cases are litigated, attorneys are starting to go after the fleet's safety culture rather than the event itself. That's where Netrodyne comes in. Netrodyne helps your fleet build a powerful safety culture in three key ways. First, live in-cab audio alerts for risky driving to address issues in real time. Second, a weekly virtual coaching session where drivers review where they improved over the prior week, along with their areas for improvement for the next week using video examples. Think homework, not a trip to the principal's office. Finally, the industry's leading safety AI recommends the drivers who most require hands-on help so your team can focus their efforts for maximum impact. Go to Netrodyne.com to upgrade your fleet's safety culture. And now, to learn more about using technology, video, and AI to support driver coaching and fleet safety, I'm very excited to bring in John Elliott, founder and executive chairman of Load One. John, it's great to have you with us here on TT Newsmakers.
Thanks for having me.
So Load One has been an early adopter of various forms of in-cab technology. That of course includes onboard video and event recorders. So just to start the conversation here, could you give us an overview of the types of systems your company has deployed in its trucks? And what type of information are you able to collect through that technology?
We use a system called Netrodyne. We were actually a very, very early adopter of their technology. I'll call it the bleeding edge. They didn't have a functioning system at that point. They approached us with an idea. We found it to be, I found it to be very intriguing. I knew some of the people, had worked with them in the past at other companies, using AI and looking holistically at it a different way. To go back, we actually got for probably 4 or 5, 6 months, we had cell phones mounted up all over the trucks, capturing data and that so that they could create the original algorithms and start to put together a product. And then we had, I'll say the alpha, the beta, the gamma, the delta, different camera models as we tried to find one that would work and hold up in that. But, it really, since it analyzes 100% of the drive time, we were truly confident we were getting the entire picture of the day for a driver, including the good and the not so good. But that way we could focus not just, we've always been more of a carrot company than a stick company, but that let us focus on positive recognition. And like at that time, the other camera providers, pretty much what you got was the bad alerts, just like you got from a lot of in-cab telematics systems, for G-force or hard braking. You never saw good, you just saw the bad. And that's not really a fair picture for a driver.
No, it's very helpful. And we've seen this technology certainly, evolve over the years. From the, late 80s into the 90s, early mobile comm systems, of course, the ELD mandate makes a lot of this, some of this standard on most trucks on the road. But we've seen onboard video has really been an area where we've seen a lot of growth, a lot of adoption within the trucking industry. So just tell us a little bit more, I think, on how you take this technology and actually incorporate it into your overall safety program at Load One. How do your safety staff and your driver managers, how do they use this information to both identify safety risks and also coach drivers? And maybe you can even give an example of how you can use video in a driver coaching session.
The Netrodyne driver eye shares any video with the driver instantaneously, whether they're in the office or thousands of miles away, by leveraging the driver eye app, which we've also incorporated into our own proprietary app for our drivers. drivers like it, and it's easy, and that's a big factor. We can also utilize Netrodyne. They have virtual coaching, they have self-coaching options, which allow us to very easily automate coaching. When the driver score is not responding the way we would like with the virtual coaching, then we can intervene by calling the driver or having them come in for a one-on-one and sit down with them and look at their habits. But it also, like I said before, it lets us focus on the positive, and I think that is very, very important into driver acceptance of in-cab camera systems, is when you can look at the positive and the negative.
Yeah, it doesn't always have to be punitive, right? I mean, this is something.
No, I mean, if you want drivers to embrace something, it really has to be more of a holistic view, and because again, I mean, anyone can make one mistake a day, or what we would categorize as a mistake, and to focus on that doesn't representative of the other 23.9 hours of the day that driver functioned for your company.
For sure, and I'll dive into a little bit more of that, and some of the opportunities to feed into bonus programs and driver recognition. But of course, at the end of the day, any sort of technology deployment like this, the ultimate goal is to boost safety, and prevent crashes. From what you've seen from using the technology, have you seen a substantial improvement in your safety metrics as a result of using in-cab technology, and onboard video?
We had good numbers before this. Safety has always been important to us. We've always tried to bring technology into the cab and training and those things to minimize our insurance risks. Because protecting our drivers and the motoring public is first and foremost. And a well-run safety department is critical to a well-run balance sheet for a trucking company. After installing the driver eye system, I'll be honest with you, we saw a 59% reduction in claims year over year. It was even better with an impressive 82% decrease in claims. I was blown away, to be honest. Then we implemented what they call our safety playbook program. It's offered through Netrodyne. We did that in August of 2023. And that we really worked to improve our what they call green zone scores. We were able to do that by over 13%, which led to yet another 25% improvement in our unsafe driving CSA score and a 45% improvement in our crash indicator score, which to me is amazing. Less crashes, less exposure, and less unsafe driver behavior means more money saved, and drivers spend more time working instead of being pulled over, roadside inspections, or involved in accidents. And the company keeps the money where it should be going, to the company and to the driver and to the equipment and those things. Nobody wants to spend out on needlessly for insurance claims, and especially to lawyers' fees and litigation that we know is out of control.
Yeah, you mentioned a couple of those real pain points for the industry. Of course, the nuclear verdicts we've seen. Really high dollar settlements and insurance costs. Just rising.
ATA has continued to lead the fight against for that and tort reform, and kudos to them. But you know what? A smart trucking company needs to have the technology to defend itself in court more than ever.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And I think about what's possible now with in-cab technology, and it's interesting to see how that that has evolved over the years. And from the early days of basic mobile communications in the cab to telematics and tracking hard brakes and engine data to where we are now with video, and not just video, but really extracting some data from that information, from that video as well. From what you've seen over the years, John, what can trucking companies do today with in-cab technology, that wasn't possible, say 5 or 10 years ago?
When we started with Netrodyne in 2017, they were the only company at that time that had real AI alerts. The other legacy providers were using inertial alerts, and seeing only part of the story. AI has really advanced tremendously, and Netrodyne has continued to be on the forefront of that with us. There were a lot of, I'll say, good systems out there back then. There were a lot of good systems without AI, but the amount, like a lot of businesses, I think trucking has just been overwhelmed with the amount of data that's available, and the amount of the ability to process that data or effectively use that data. I mean, you can have a ton of data, but if you can't manage it, can't utilize it, especially real time, that's where AI has just made such a difference, for driver training, improvement, and exoneration. I couldn't imagine running a trucking company without systems like that today. You're just playing with fire.
Yeah, there's so much data now. You mentioned it. I think you have it spot on. If you're, certainly if you're at the forefront or you're on the leading edge of technology adoption, you experience this. But you really, I think just about anybody who's running a modern trucking operation now is swimming in data. And there's so much, it's kind of the problem of drinking from the fire hose. How do you use all this information that you have, but you have to extract information from it? And, that really does tie into that topic of artificial intelligence and machine learning. Of course, there's a ton of hype about that across every industry you can imagine, but there are some, I think, really promising use cases here in the trucking industry. Whether it's detecting patterns in the data, extracting insights from this information. Onboard video, I think, is a great example because that can be, maybe the most data rich information you have. There's so much there, but how do you use it? How do you get it out of from video? So I think there's an opportunity now if you can really use some AI to dive into what are the trends and the metrics that you need to be aware of. What do you really need to work on as a manager? You can maybe take a more holistic look at driver safety, right? It's not just reviewing a video clip. You can maybe have a deeper analysis of how drivers are really performing hour after hour after hour, day after day, and why they're performing that way. So just, I know we've come a long way, but how much potential do you see for AI to continue to raise the bar for driver safety, especially from that fleet management perspective?
It's amazing looking back, 5-10 years ago, what we thought was possible, it was probably not even our scope today. And I think that's going to continue to happen. I think, like you said, there's so much data, but the AI analyzing it and being able to see it so real time. I think, traditionally we were a reactive industry. When your insurance claims came in or your CSA scores changed, then safety shifted the focus to that area. Let's say for unsafe crashes, or if your following distances were too close, off reports and things like that. AI really analyzes all this data where you can look much more real time, and before a trend really gets to develop into a problem area, you can shift training, you can focus on it and kind of squash it before it becomes a problem. So you go from proactive versus being reactive. And like I said, unfortunately, as an industry, technology was limited. The truck is still 18 wheels going down the highway. You still have a driver. I mean, a lot of those things haven't changed, but the technology has changed a ton. And the technology is really what allows us to move from being proactive from reactive.
Yeah, you're really trying to get ahead of this and not just, let's coach a driver who had an incident. Let's prevent it before it ever happens. And that's, of course, such a better stance for safety, and having that information and some of those tools at your disposal to do that, I think are really, really a huge leap forward. You spent some time earlier talking about driver acceptance. That's, important aspect of really any technology deployment, especially in trucking, right? I mean, it's, even in a down freight market, there's still a lot of pressure on trucking companies to, retain their drivers. Recruiting the drivers is always a challenge. And it's of course, there's a lot of cost, if you have a high turnover rate. And it's also tough on your safety culture. So driver retention, driver recruiting are always, top priority or very high priority, regardless of market conditions. That being said, if you look at the technologies out there, there often is a lot of resistance to cab cameras, certainly historically. And I think there's been more acceptance and understanding of that in more recent years. But, John, how did your company's drivers initially react when you first introduced video safety technology to your fleet? And what were you able to say and do to eventually gain that buy-in from the drivers? That is so important.
I think resistance to technology is unfortunately been commonplace in our industry and like a lot of industries. If I go back over time, I mean, look at the most recent news. You had the port strike. One of the big concerns was automation.
Yep.
You know, I can remember when we first put satellite systems in trucks, everyone was worried that all the dispatchers were going to be out of jobs. You know, I mean, it just doesn't work that way. Yeah. But I think with the in-cab technology, yes, drivers were highly concerned and resistant to it. We started off with what I would call an engaged set of drivers, to have them do it first, to get their buy-in. I think when you help explain to drivers that we're doing this to protect you, when, you know, I don't know the exact statistic today, but it used to be, 70, 80% of the time it was the motor vehicle's fault, not the commercial truck's fault.
Yeah.
And when you start to explain that to a driver, when they see the penalties and drivers getting charged with, homicide or negligent homicide or vehicle homicide and things like that, or, getting sued and that, when they start to realize, like, not just trucking companies, they need protected at their level as well. And that. So, and again, I think we combined it with a small set first who really engaged in it and let them kind of explain to other drivers and spread the word. We put together a program to show them how we were protecting them, not just the company. Real quick, we were not looking to get rid of a lot of drivers. That was not in our business interest. Do we want to make our drivers, even our good drivers, better? Absolutely. And everybody should strive to be better at their job every day. And the technology helps to let people see that and do that. That, and like I said, I think it was really leading with a carrot instead of a stick. I think it was really how you approach it. I mean, there's a lot of things that are sold in how the carrier delivers it to their drivers.
Yeah. Another aspect that I often hear from companies that have been successful with onboard video, with cab cameras, is clear communication with drivers about, one, why is the company installing the dash cameras? And two, how do they work, right? I mean, I think there's a lot of fear and misunderstanding about what the technology does and what it's for. But when you have a little bit of familiarity, you have a chance to maybe be hands-on with the technology and understand it better. Some of that fear starts to subside. Does that ring true for you, John? I mean, have you found that once drivers are familiar with it, and also when they have a clear understanding?
100%. I mean, there were drivers that thought we were going to sit there and watch them all day. Again, it goes back to the original days of satellite. They thought that every time they stopped for coffee, we were going to be calling them, asking what they were doing. And, you try to explain nicely to drivers, we don't have time people to sit and do that all day. It's just not functional. But again, I think, like you said, acceptance is much better today. It was no different. We were an early adopter of electronic logs. I mean, it was my people told me it was going to be the end of our company. The recruiting efforts were going to be terrible, this, that. Everyone was going to quit. In the end, I think we lost 2 drivers who didn't even give it a try, which is fine. But after a little while, when the drivers realized that technology really protected them and put the onus on dispatch and sales and the customers and everything, it took some of that pressure off them. They realized that, again, it's not a negative to them; it's a positive. I mean, it's historic with technology. I mean, when I first spec'd all our new trucks with automatic transmissions, again, it was going to be the end of the world. I'm not driving this, that. This thing is going to malfunction and do this, that. And I said, okay, guys, y'all drive them 30 days. If you hate them, they'll figure it out. Well, I guarantee you, in 30 days, not one guy wanted to switch back to a manual transmission. But again, a lot of it just goes back to approach, and a lot of that has to do with the corporate culture. If your company has a culture of being driver-centric or communicating effectively and openly with your drivers and embracing feedback, then any technology rollout is a lot easier. I mean, we have a driver app. It was like, it's the worst thing in the world. 30 days into it, I mean, it was a crisis when it went down for 60 seconds to reboot a server, and they're all over the internet. It's down, app's down. It's amazing how fast technology and the mentality of embracing technology can shift.
Yeah, for sure. And going back to your analogy of the the carrot versus the stick, see a lot of fleets out there, using in-cab data, safety scores, video, to recognize and reward their top drivers for exemplary performance. Right? I mean, it's these safety scores can tie in with driver bonuses, other performance-based incentives. Just talk to me a bit about how Load One is using this data to really incentivize safety, and kind of provide that carrot to the drivers.
We have a driver rewards program that we've been part of for a long time. We were Staymetrics, another reward retention provider. We were their first customer as well. We tend to be number one in a lot of things, but good and bad. But we use their system to reward our drivers based on their safety scores, how they improve their safety scores. Obviously, higher group there's groupings. The higher the grouping that they're in, or the amount of improvement they make, bases them on how they're rewarded monthly and their points, that they're able to use those points then for merchandise and products and services all across the internet.
Yeah, I imagine that there's also some even friendly competition or gamification element to this,
Exactly.
Right? You want to be, see if you can get a better score than some of your peers, right?
Yeah, we didn't try to push that, but that is very self-manifesting. Right? That is very self-manifesting. I laugh. We have an internal Facebook group for the company and the drivers, and when the results for the week come out of the top scorers at most improved, you people are jumping right on there. Well, I moved mine up this much. I did this. I did that. I'm what's the parameter on this one? I'm so close. I want to get past that, and I want to. And again, all those things are great, because the bottom line is, safety is the winner. Yeah. And if safety is the winner, the drivers are the winner because they're safer. We're going to get them home to their families, and the motoring public and our families on the road are safer as an automatic byproduct of that. So it's just not a lot of products where you look and say, if done right, it's a win-win.
Yeah.
But this is really one of them.
Yeah. And I've been covering the technology side of the trucking industry for about 13 years now, and it's amazing how much has changed. And one of the biggest changes was, I remember when I started, video cameras in the cab were pretty niche, right? I mean, there were some early adopters, but that was not a common thing across the industry. But, certainly over the last decade, we've absolutely seen this become increasingly commonplace. One of the main reasons for that, we touched on earlier, that's liability protection, both for the company and for the driver. A lot of that is driven, of course, by, just the risk involved of nuclear verdicts, just the situation where you sometimes see a settlement where it's just one person's word against another and there's no evidence. But having that evidence is so valuable, especially in an industry where, we have professional drivers who are sharing the road with non-professional drivers who are often just bad drivers, unfortunately, and distracted drivers. So if you are overwhelmingly, the safer operator on the road, then this is really valuable information to show what really happened on the road. But from your experience, John, just how effective is video in terms of protecting the company, protecting the driver from some of the litigation?
It makes things very transparent. We're not always in the right, and the cameras are going to tell us that.
Yep.
And when that's the case, then we need to respond accordingly and do what we need to do to rectify something accordingly if we're not in the right. But with the percentages being in the professional driver's favor by far, statistically, it makes things very clear. We're able to send videos right down to a driver's phone. There are a lot of times at an accident scene where the driver's able to show the video to the officer because the motorist has a very different story of what happened than what the video shows. And a lot of times they've ripped up tickets or reissued tickets or things like that, because I'm not blaming law enforcement. Human nature tends to side with the individual in the car versus the big truck, which is they see as a corporation versus a human being, which isn't fair or right, but it's just part of the reality of it. So I think this really helps clarify. I can't even tell you how many times it's changed the scene or the results of what happened right at the scene one And then two, how many times when you get a representation from an attorney and you send them the video, they choose not to pursue the case because they know they're not going to convince a jury or anyone that we're at fault based on the video evidence. Now, like I said, when you're wrong, you're wrong. So it's not going to help you, but it's the truth. So, good or bad, you have to deal with it. And if you manage your company effectively, when you see things or have areas of problems or drivers of concern, then you need to deal with that. And if you choose to bury your head in the sand and ignore the data and the facts of what the technology gives you, then you're opening up a problem for yourself. But I think that's true with any technology. That's why a lot of companies never wanted electronic logs or things like that, because they wanted to operate outside the bounds. Yeah. But again, I personally would never ever want to operate a trucking company or fleet without in-cab technology like that today. You're rolling the dice with the legal system out there.
Yeah, certainly it brings transparency, and if you're one of the safe operators out there, that transparency is going to be a good thing for you much more often than bad, I think. Of course, I wanted to touch on another aspect of video. Of course, there's a lot of different forms of dash cams and video event recorders that are out on the market. And you see, basically it runs the gamut from basic, simple dash cams that an owner operator even might just put on the dash, to some fleets that are using forward-facing cameras only, just basically looking out on the road and around the vehicle. And of course, the more full-featured systems have forward-facing and driver-facing cameras that, of course, can provide that additional information for safety and coaching, including ways that you can detect fatigue or distracted driving. But what's your stance, John, on forward-facing only versus the two-way cameras, and where do you see the most value?
We run a quad camera system. So we have a forward-facing camera, we have a left and right-facing camera, and we have an inward-facing camera. Most of our fleet, the inward-facing is turned off. As far as video, yep. we can use the technology to detect distracted driving or head nodding or things like that without doing video. There are ways to do that now. I understand drivers have angst with in-cab cameras facing them. Not gonna lie, I'm not sure I would love a camera facing me, even though I'm not doing anything wrong. It's maybe just a little uncomfortable, or a little bit of personal privacy for people. So we again have focused on the outward facing and on the 3 forward cameras. The inward camera is used to collect other data without doing video. Again, there's a way to do that. Now, we do have cases where we've had concerns with drivers. If we see a trend, lane departures or things like that, where we'll say to a driver, hey, after 1 or 2 times, listen, you have an option. We're going to take you out of service, or we're turning your inward-facing camera on for your own safety. We don't know if you're touching your cell phone. We don't know if you have a sleep apnea issue or what it is. But we need to know. We need to protect you. And so that's an effective tool, and surprisingly, a lot of times it clears up the issue very quickly.
No, it's very helpful, and it is amazing how many different ways you can configure the technology to suit the needs of your own fleet operations. And every company's a little bit different, every fleet's a little bit different. So having those options and ability to fit what you need is I think
even with inward facing, it's very definitive where the camera looks. But we have a lot of husband and wife teams, so there was a lot of husbands that were very concerned about what could be seen, and that, and we understand and respect that. You can show them the video angle and this, that, but again, I understand their concerns for their privacy or their privacy of their partner.
For sure. I also wanted to quickly kind of touch on, freight market conditions. As we all know, it's been a tough, really 2.5 years now in terms of freight rates. Just more, it's a bit of an overcapacity situation relative.
Been a roller coaster, that's for sure.
Yeah, right. And if you go back before that, coming down off of a historic high during the bounce back from the pandemic. But really, what I've heard, especially during a prolonged time period where rates are lower, margins are thin, it really places a lot of importance on controlling costs. And really, any technology that a company is looking to deploy, it's important to justify that. It's important to justify those investments and make sure that those investments pay off. You can get a return on investment, especially in a tough market. How do you think about that ROI and especially for video? How does that pay for itself?
I think it's probably one of the easiest ROIs for a fleet to justify. I mean, I can look at our numbers and, we're in captive insurance. So, the first so many hundreds of thousands of dollars or any claim is a check we're writing straight out of our company. So those cameras reducing accidents or incidents, even 5, 10, 15%, it does not take very much for a CFO to justify the cost analysis on the technology. And I think it's much easier today with AI, AI analyzing the incidents. I mean, I think some of the earlier legacy camera systems, you got a lot of alerts. You had to have a whole team of people sitting there reviewing videos. So you had a lot of human cost behind that. And those people then had to call and coach the drivers and that. AI has automated a ton of that. So we see, yes, there's a hard brake or, a close falling distance, but that was because the car pulled in front of the truck and changed lanes. There's no need for us to analyze that. There's no need for us to call the driver and ask him about his hard brake, and that we can see that he reacted to something that wasn't in his control. So, when you take out that legacy cost of the human monitoring and then replace it with AI, which is obviously faster, and that enables us to operate much more real time, it's very easy to see how those safety numbers, people would be like, well, your insurance company give you a discount. No, they don't. The reality is insurance is a simple calculation. Your losses ultimately end up, tying to your premium. If you put in systems, you run a good safety system, whether it be cameras or other systems, you reduce your frequency of accidents, and thus you reduce your cost outlay of accidents, you're going to see lower premiums. Doesn't mean premiums are going to go down, because that's a very hard market as well. But at least you're going to see that you're able to mitigate rate increases much more dramatically than what your competitors can, who don't embrace technology for safety.
Yeah, for sure. And it doesn't take too many incidents prevented for it to pretty clearly pay for itself. I think in a lot of these cases. You mentioned some of the use of AI to automate some of the analysis of all the video and like what is the information that a company really should act upon. Another potential use case for AI in trucking that I find quite interesting is driver retention. Using some of the data that's captured on board, how a driver is driving, other forms of data that come in. Maybe you can even predict, which driver is most likely to leave your company. And if you can pinpoint that, it gives you a chance to proactively address it, maybe work with that driver, talk to that driver, and then avoid that high cost of recruiting and then onboarding another driver. Do you see opportunities for AI to help companies on that driver turnover side of the business?
Yes and no. I think it's very effective to help retain your good drivers. It is very effective to help you not retain your bad drivers, which is ideal. Yeah. It points out who's good, and when you tie it with a reward system and positive aspects to it, and there's, like I said, some friendly gamification or challenges in that's great for your 80-20, let's say, ratio. Your 20% who aren't your best drivers, who don't want to embrace safety, live on that edge, don't like getting the calls or the coaching and that. It may frustrate them over time, and over time they may choose to go somewhere else. You would hope that they're going to choose to change and improve. And even some drivers who were very stubborn, I found that once they saw the videos, it's amazing, even though they were the guys looking out the windshield when it happened and saw it real time, when they sit back and watch it on a video, there's still a high percentage that actually will look and say, looking at that now, that was not the right move, or I shouldn't have been as aggressive, or I should have done this, or they reflect. And I think that's good, because a lot of times it's your most senior drivers and best drivers who can be your outliers a little bit, because you get cocky, you get comfortable. I've been driving 30 years, so you get comfortable. You can push the vehicles to a little more to the edge of their abilities and things like that. And they see it firsthand, and it helps them to realize that, I may be smart and I may be incredibly experienced, but that's not the way I should operate as a professional driver. So I think it's really a win-win. You may over time have a little bit that leave, but I think that's probably for the better for a company. I have a lot of drivers now that will say they would never operate without a camera in their truck, especially ones that have been, once somebody's been involved in an incident, or they'll get a call in on the road from an angry driver, and we'll pull the video and be like, no, that guy came across the lane. It was not our truck. And, when the drivers realize that protects them, after a little while, they don't want to operate without it, because they want that protection. They want that shield, or, on their career, and that, because, people love to make outlandish claims, and like I said, without even getting in the litigation world, so I think it, in the big picture, it is definitely a much, much more positive retention tool than going to hurt you.
Yeah, and also a good reminder that not all driver turnover is bad for the company. Like, there's some of that unfortunately should happen if in some cases, but also I think the opportunity to self-correct, right, when you can see video is gives you the opportunity to kind of own your own professional improvement. I always like to ask a bit of a crystal ball question toward the end of these programs, and we've spent some time talking about how in-cab technology has expanded and advanced over the years from the early days of telematics. But as you look ahead, what do you envision in-cab technology becoming in the future? Right? I mean, where can this go next? And again, a bit of a crystal ball question, but what are your thoughts on where we might be headed in the future?
Automated driving has always been a big hot topic for the last 5-10 years. I think it was an overheated topic. I really don't see it anytime in the next 10-15 years being any big game changer in industry. I think it's done a lot of good things. Things like lane departures, self-centering on our trucks, automatic braking, adaptive cruise control. All those technologies kind of came out of the push for automated driving. But I think that technology will continue to enhance the safety of our drivers behind the wheel. But I see it for a foreseeable time that our drivers are going to be the captains of the ships and in control of those trucks. I go back to the simple analogy of, technology took your airlines used to have 4 people sitting up front in that cockpit. Now it's 2. And that plane can do most everything itself, but there's still 30 years later, there's still 2 pilots sitting up in the front there. And the other one I go back to is the railroad. That is the most controlled transportation environment there is. And you see an engineer in every cab. Those trains aren't running automated. So to sit there and say we're going to send trucks down a highway fully automated with no driver in it, I don't see. But I do think, like I said, I think technology, AI, and other forms of technology will enhance. I think we'll see hours of service hopefully change to be more of a regulated by your body. There are some drivers that can drive longer and be perfectly fine. There are some drivers that, today they're afraid to pull over and take a nap that they might need because they can't shut a clock off. But if the system knows what your body's doing and what it needs for safety, I think that would be a huge enhancement for our industry and for safety. And again, I think the in-cab technology experience is just going to become greater. Look at things like the mirrors going to cameras that'll have broader views, more alerts, more sensors. There's downsides. Technology gets more and more complicated. There's more and more things that go wrong. Simple sensors and things like that. But I think in the big picture, I think it's just going to continue to get better and make the driving experience better for our drivers.
Yeah, well, if the last decade or so is any indication, I'm sure it'll change quite a bit, in the 10 years ahead. Before I let you go, John, I'd love to open it up to any final thoughts you'd like to share with us about in-cab technology and driver safety, just to close it out.
I think that smart companies will continue to invest in safety, and a big part of that today is technology. I believe the ROI is there. I believe we have an obligation as companies operating on the highways that we need to be as safe as possible, not only for our drivers, but for the motoring public. I think it's the moral and responsible thing to do. But the good thing is it can also be done with a very positive effect to ROI and your financials as a company. So putting your head in the sand or trying to pretend that it's not a good thing to do is not what I would surely advise. And I think smart operators, and I think in hard economic climates, smart operators will survive and thrive in the long term, but they'll survive storms. Those who tend to live on the cusp and don't want to invest smartly tend to not weather storms very well. So I'm optimistic that there's still more to come in the safety aspect with technology. And I think as much as we've made huge advances, again, I think there's still a lot of great things to come and embrace in the future.
Well, hey, John, this has been a great conversation. I see we are a bit over time here, but I appreciate you taking time out of your Monday here to talk to us and share your thoughts and ideas and, your experiences at Load One. So thank you again for joining the program and sharing your
Thanks for having
me. Thank you for joining us today. For more information on future episodes, visit ttnews.com. This has been Transport Topics Newsmakers.